Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Headspring webinar on the new normal, success through collaboration. My name is Desiree, and I'm a digital marketing specialist here at Headspring. I'm also your moderator today. We'd love for you to send in your questions during this webinar for a Q&A towards the end. You can do that by clicking on the little question mark at your right-hand side in the corner. Please also use this function to submit any answers throughout the webinar that we'll be asking throughout the presentation. I am thrilled to introduce our presenters today. One of them is Marie-Louise Maywald, who is a learning and development consultant, as well as a Headspring faculty member and coach. Hello.
Hi. Hi, Des.
I'm also here with Britta Postner, who is a founder and director of the collaboration practice. Hi, Britta.
Hello.
So with further ado, I think we should begin. I'm
Thank you.
excited.
Super. Thank you, Desiree, and a very warm welcome to this webinar, both from my colleague and friend Britta and myself. And with this topic of collaboration, it just felt wrong if there was just one of us presenting this. So Britta and I joined forces and, well, we collaborated on this content together. And as Desiree said, I'm Marie-Louise Maywald. I've been working in leadership development for about 15 years, both in-house for companies like Google and Novartis, as well as for external providers like the Columbia Business School and, of course, Headspring. And as the invite said, Britta is our collaboration guru. She's been collaborating in her first career in advertising all the way through to her current role as an educator, a speaker, and of course the founder of the collaboration practice. And so over the years, Britta and I have been working together on a number of clients, and right now we're working on AstraZeneca together, which is a joy. And so in the course of this webinar, we'll be talking about collaboration, and that is both virtual as well as in the physical world, because we believe that the main levers for collaboration are the same, whether you're in a room together or you're physically distant. But how you use them, what you pay attention to, and to what extent, that differs. And so we have an ambitious schedule. We want you to get some real value out of this session. But again, as Desiree already mentioned, we also want this to be as interactive as possible. So we ask you to participate in the chat function, which will be marked by the little question mark. And we have a few minutes of Q&A at the end. And we promise that if we don't get to your questions during the webinar, we'll make sure that Desiree can send out the questions afterwards. Well, the answers to the questions again. So yes, here's our first way of getting some interaction going. In the question box, please let us know, why do you collaborate? Type in your answers and just tell us, why do you collaborate, both at work and in your spare time? How does it help you? Let's have a look what people are saying. How does it help you? And do you feel you have to? And what does it give you? Still waiting for some things to come through. Let me just have a quick look here. Sorry for my big fingers. Just having, oh yes, and people are saying yes. No one has all the answers. Absolutely. It's fun. Yes, it is fun if the collaboration is working. I get more done. Yep. And there are lots of teams in my organization. So yes, your organizations are already asking you to kind of put things together and collaborate. So absolutely, it's a combination of, you know, having fun, enjoying it, and we'll be talking about how we're evolutionary primed to collaborate. And it's baked into our organizations. Yeah. So let's go to the next slide and have a look at the origins of the word collaboration. So it's pretty straightforward. It comes from Latin, com, with, and laborare, to work. So to work with. but it's much more interesting to see how and when it entered the English language. And sources vary, but somewhere between 1840 and 1870, it seems to have entered the English language. And as you can see from this graph here on the, I pulled from Google Books search, it really didn't get used in books until about 1900, 1910. So while the concept isn't new, you can see how the references to it skyrocketed over the past 100 years. But exactly how old is this concept? Let's have a quick look at the evolution of collaboration. So long before the modern human appeared, about 2 million years ago, we had hunters and gatherers, and those roamed the earth. And archaeologists today argue that their use of fire and stone tools shows that they were collaborating for survival. So the mere kind of basics. And so as they were progressing through the Neolithic and the agricultural revolution, our ancestors became more and more sophisticated in their settlements, in the way they were farming, and they were traveling the earth, and so did their methods and motifs for collaboration. And so from 1760 to about 1840, Europe and America experienced the Industrial Revolution. Names like Henry Ford and Frederick Taylor come to mind. These gentlemen were responsible for creating manufacturing plants and moving conveyor belts. The idea of the modern plant as we have it today really was born back then. But this mechanistic worldview doesn't really require collaboration in the way we look at it now. Every worker is just a small cog in a large machine, and therefore they only need to fulfill a very narrow role. If all workers deliver according to plan, then this well-oiled human machine works. However, towards the end of this period, and as we're kind of moving into World War I, we see the term collaboration enter both our vocabulary and our books, as we saw on the last slide. But it wasn't until the knowledge revolution at the turn of the last century that we really had a need for effective and sophisticated collaboration. It became more and more pressing. So when knowledge became power, it became clear that wider networks of people and ideas needed to be created. And for the past, excuse me, for the past 20, you've seen the rise of AI and robotics, the digital revolution. And the digital revolution truly brings home the need for us to collaborate to build something that is bigger than the sum of its parts. No one expert can handle the complexities of the world we have created for ourselves. And I think COVID and the pandemic have made that really, really explicit to us. People around the world are collaborating to deliver. So I asked myself, what is the next frontier of collaboration? And I think it's how we as humans collaborate with machines. If the machine take over the more mundane aspects of our work, we humans could spend more and more time really creative, value-adding activities. Because there's research from university that shows that we feel better when we collaborate. At least it shows us we feel better when we collaborate with other humans. I'm not sure about machines. But just as this whole kind of story shows us that collaboration is embedded in our DNA and helped with our survival, it also makes really good business sense. And Britta has some sort of insights for us into that. Over to you, Britta.
That's right. Thank you, Marilisa. So we've realized now and talked about how collaboration has evolved and the fact that it's important, but does it also have a business impact? Does it drive results? Because at the end of the day, this is what we're here to do. And of course, you know, the short answer is yes, it does. There has been a lot of research from Deloitte showing that companies that put collaboration at the heart of their culture, they are twice as much to outperform their competitors. People in a survey that the guys did, 2/3 of the 1,000 people who had answered the survey have basically said that when they collaborate, the results are better. They're more innovative. They are just more focused, and they're qualitatively better. And really, in another survey that they did for Google, Deloitte found out that the Australian economy alone is losing a year $46 billion US. So it has a real impact on the bottom line. What does that mean actually for the organization and the culture? As you can see here, there is 5 areas where collaboration can really lift the results. The first one is saving through the best practice knowledge transfer. Now, this is something that is often discussed with our clients actually, and people go, so how do you do this? Do you need a wiki? Do you need an AI tool? How do you make sure that all the knowledge here is used? And the answer really is I think less about the what and more about the why and how people are using those tools. The fact of the matter is that in our organization, there's a lot of untapped potential because the knowledge isn't shared and it's not collaborated between the different segments and departments. So breaking down those silos and making sure that best practice is transferred, is discussed, is shared, as much as learning from mistakes is shared, because that at the end of the day, where knowledge is generated as well, is key for collaboration to work and for a collaborative culture to be established, okay? The second point is greater, more solid decision making when you collaborate, because you're using the power of the interdisciplinary working and integrated working. And this is something that might in some cultures go also against how we're raised and how we're socialized, because often we're working in relatively hierarchical constructs, and the processes that we follow are linear. Collaboration allows us to speed that up and to make sure we've got the right people, the decision makers, in the right meetings to co-create and to make sure that the decisions are made there and then. Which brings us, to the next point, which is increased revenue through information sharing. If you change your processes in a way that things are less linear and more driven through co-creation, collaboration, parallel processes, you actually speed up things quite considerably. And we see that a lot at the moment, driven through COVID in, for example, the pharma industry, where whole processes that normally would take months, if not years, the search for vaccination is now shortened, and not because people are suddenly hazardous with their responsibility, not at all. To the contrary, they are trying to figure out and how to work differently, how to collaborate more, to make sure the information is where it needs to be, and the flow of information speeds things up and aids decision making. The next point is increased innovation. Now, this is a really important one, because as we will see shortly also in one of the models that we will share with you, if you collaborate, if you share information, if you share learning, you increase also the ability to associate, the ability to think about impacts, new impacts, and through that also to innovate. That's a really key competitive advantage that collaboration brings. And of course, if the eye is on the productivity and innovation ball, you will optimize the results because you're focused on the output and not on anything else that might hinder really getting the best results. Okay, so collaboration has an impact, has a monetary impact on the bottom line, and fundamentally, I have now gone too far, actually delivers really quite hardcore, soft and hard factors results, because the collaboration aided through trust, which we'll come onto that in a minute, is actually first and foremost increasing engagement. And as a lot of you probably know from the Gallup studies, increased engagement means increased productivity. So a culture of trust and collaboration has increased proven engagement in organizations by 76%, which in turn then means that productivity is increased by 50% because the people know why they're doing what they're doing. They really care and feel that they're working in an environment where they can give their best and where they can collaborate to the best benefit of the end result. That's how they drive their engagement. If that's the case and they actively feel they contribute to the overall, they, as you can see here also, have much reduced stress because the eye is on the ball, the eye is on the result. It's about innovation and productivity and less about maybe political hurdles and everything else that might come with that. And of course, reduced stress will also help to reduce and decrease burnout, as well as the reduction of sick leave. So it all hangs together. It's a mix of soft and hard factors. Collaboration is effective. How can you measure that? And what actually do we mean when we talk about collaboration? Now, we have designed a model that consists of 8 facets. And these 8 facets actually are built on the body of knowledge in that field at the moment, and therefore are very varied. Often when we talk about collaboration, we hear people go, yeah, we've got, Slack and Zoom and all these technologies, and this is only a small part of what collaboration is about. And in fact, that small part, and I know we'll come on to talking about this, can also lead to collaboration stress, because suddenly people don't know where to look, all these different platforms, and where to find the information, where to communicate. So we have to watch how we use these things. But as you can see here in the model as well, collaborative technologies is one of the facets. Trust, we will talk much more about, is one of the key drivers of collaboration. And so, in fact, is purpose and the values. And Marilisa will talk about this a bit later. How we communicate with each other across also departments, across countries, maybe even across industries. So the communication maturity, is it hierarchical? Can everyone talk to everyone? Is there a free flow of information, is another key aspect. And such is also structural flexibility. So how are we breaking silos if we have them? How hierarchical or non-hierarchical are we behaving? Not necessarily only in communication behavior, but also in information flow. How do pieces of information trickle through the organization? Is it word of mouth? Is it actually orchestrated? What's happening there? The output focus is, of course, key, because we've just seen how important it is. And so then is collaborative behavior internally and externally. And that really means networking. And when I say networking, I'm not talking about who I'm talking about ideas networking. So the collaboration and the benefit and the association that happens when you ask someone, maybe from an unrelated field, if you look at cross-industry external collaboration, or from a totally different country who might have had a different experience or a different problem to solve. Yeah, that collaboration that then happens, that networking and that exchange is what sits behind collaborative behavior, internal and external. So that's the model. And as I said, there's 2 key drivers. One is trust, which I'll come on to talk about now, because trust, of course, is a catalyst of collaboration. There is no collaboration without trust. Okay. Now, these different facets will work in a face-to-face environment as well as virtually. Okay, so that means what we're talking about now, of course, means in virtual terms we will have some adjustments to make, and as far as trust is concerned, we'll talk about this, of course, but everything that's happening now through COVID is really the same as far as collaboration is concerned, because the basics for how collaboration works is the same whether you see each other or whether you actually are working virtually. So clicking. So trust. What do I mean by trust? There is the trust that is maybe the most, let's call it superficial trust, the more the trust that we are used to referring to, which is reliability. It is, I trust that when you send me an email, that the information is right. I trust that you will answer the phone when I ring you. This is a level of trust that is more easier to give if you're a leader, if you're part of a team. The trust, though, that we're talking here about is a very primal, fundamental trust. It's the trust that allows you to make yourself vulnerable. It's the trust that allows you to reveal something about yourself, that says something about how you lead, how you do business, how you act in a team, what your red buttons are maybe, or your red lines. And so it's that trust that is the absolute fundament of any collaborative culture, of any great team as well. And there's actually one guy, Patrick Lencioni, who's created a really fantastic model that we briefly wanted to share with you, because it helps really instill that collaborative behavior and collaborative culture. Now, he's saying that trust, this deep trust, is the basis for great teamwork, in fact, for great work in companies. And when we do workshops on this, often we're being asked, you know, how do you do that? Surely that takes time. Surely you can't do this virtually. And actually, you can. The difference between virtual work and creating trust virtually versus face-to-face really is that you need more time. You need more time to have conversations, to foster that exchange. And we'll come on to talking about a few tips and tricks on how to do that. Yeah. But this trust that surprises people by the depth of information is something you can achieve by revealing things about yourself. Hence, we've seen here a go first. So usually, if the leader role models that and goes first and reveals something about themselves, then this really will set the tone for the rest of the team. And they will be more willing to trust each other with information that might also be hurtful or difficult at times, but that allows people to go into the next level, which is conflict. Because if you trust each other, then it's about the end result, you know, the big beacon up here. If you trust each other, that's what we want to do. You can have all the conflict in the world because it's never personal. It's always about the result. And there is a fundamental understanding, which means no matter what I say and maybe also how I say it sometimes, because I might maybe not get the tone right, for example. You know, it's not about maybe damaging someone or harming someone. It's always about getting the best result and understanding why people think differently and where they come from. So this conflict, if the trust is there, is all about defining the conflict, making sure that you talk about the elephant in the room, you know, making sure that within the team, you actually are addressing and putting on the table what everyone thinks. And even if then not everyone agrees, because things have been put on the table, the people are more likely to commit and to follow than the overall decision, because everyone has been heard. Again, trust, you know, I trust that my concerns have been heard. I understand everyone else's opinion and concerns, and we together decide to go into a certain direction. Yeah, so there is clarity and there is closure, and therefore there is commitment, which is also, of course, a key ingredient of a collaborative work environment. Now, commitment also means then there is no avoidance of accountability, because all the difficult issues have been tabled, and everyone has signed up to the direction we're going in. And so really, there is a very relatively straightforward and easy path, let's call it, towards results, because you have done all the heavy lifting when you share trust. So this is a great model to apply when you're looking at becoming more collaborative in the way your culture is working. Oops, I talked about virtual, and I wondered whether you can tell me a bit about what you think, how to foster trust virtually. I already said, you know, you need more time, of course, but what else can you do to achieve that? Please put that again in the question box, and then we'll take it from there. I'm just trying to click through here.
At least you don't have to use your finger like me.
What do I have to do? Huh. Hold on. Desiree, I'm afraid I need your help. Can you? I can't really see much. So informal meetings and chit chat I'm seeing here. Yes, absolutely. And these informal meetings and chit chat are the most important part, especially when it comes to virtual working. We'll come on to that in a second. Express oneself honestly, yes, and that's of course part of the trust dimensions, because that allows you to share emotions as well. Now that does not mean, and often, you know, when we go, well, why don't we do a collaboration workshop? People go, great, you know, we go to archery and all this. No, this is not what this is about. This is about, you know, talking honestly about what's going on with you. It's not a session where you want to, you know, necessarily hold hands and hop around. So yes, but it's important to have that chit chat, to share your emotions, to share something personal, and to reach out. And of course, all of this takes time. And you probably, like lots of other people, have the challenge that everything is speeding up when it's done virtually. And so we run from one meeting to the next. There is hardly any breaks anywhere in between. And that's a real challenge potentially in terms of how to slow down, how to take the time, how to share also information about yourself, and think about what you also want to share. Because of course this topic about, or this thought of an awareness that you need to know yourself before you actually can foster trust and collaboration is a very, very important point. Thank you for all your answers. Now, because of the importance of virtual today, let's quickly dive into how you build trust. You've brought up a lot of really fantastic points already. I just want to build on this by saying time is an important factor. How dependable you are, how respectful you are also in your tone, how transparent you are with the information. And you said, you know, ask questions, show empathy, you reveal things about yourself. There are key ways of quite quickly fostering trust, yeah, fostering deep trust. Remember, that's what we're talking about here. Bringing people into the room, especially when you have a situation where usually people are running from one meeting to the next, is a really important way or element of fostering trust, because you want to make sure that people are present. You want to make sure that people don't have with half a brain already at the previous meeting and the other half is at the next meeting. You want them to be with you. So there's ways you can do this by, at the beginning of your meetings, actively building in time for that chit chat that you mentioned, you know, actively maybe asking people, well, you know, how was your day? What's been super challenging today? You know, sensing the energy levels by having people ask questions of each other. Marilise and I are doing this quite a lot with our clients, you know, when we come into one of those virtual rooms where we have people ask questions of each other of a specific list that we have maybe even suggested, so that they can start arriving and focus on what we are wanting to discuss. Yeah? Put your senses on, all of them, because yes, you can't see people, and yes, you can't be with the people, but you know, based on how people are talking, based on how people are sitting, you know, based on the energy, you know whether there's a problem or not. Pick it up, talk about it, be transparent, you know, say what you assume the case is, and then talk about it and ask them whether you're right or wrong. And through that also, people feel seen and heard, again, fostering trust. Yeah, and leave room for conversations, because usually everything takes longer virtually. And this is something I still to this day underestimate, and we're working quite a lot virtually. Everything takes longer. You know, the team building cycles, you know, the Tuckman principles, they are the same, whether you're working virtually or working face-to-face, but you need to leave more time. So that brings us to understand your audience, because then you can actually pull people up. Make sure you know who's more likely to speak, less likely to speak. Make sure you, if I, for example, I'm super extrovert, I'm afraid to say, so I have a tendency to run people over, yeah, and talk super quick. So I have to, when I ask a question of a group of people, I have to, within me, count to 10 before I move on, because otherwise the introverts of the group will not be able to say a word. So know this about yourself and who else is there. Another trick that we learned in one of the sessions that we had that was super helpful was involve people randomly. So not pick on people in a way that might trip them up, but just ask them, have a conversation that flows naturally, and randomly ask people, because also that way you keep people's attentions, okay? And allow for feedback at the end if you have those sessions. Now, again, there's different ways of doing that. One way that I love doing is showing maybe a collage of pictures of buildings or bridges or architecture features, and have people pick a picture and talk about that. So what was the most important thing that you took out today? You know, pick a picture and tell me why. It might sound really basic often, because people look at these pictures, of course, all differently. So many different aspects appear of the topic that you had just discussed, that is really enriching to do it that way, okay? Before we move into the second really important part of what collaboration is about, let me just remind you of something that you will be aware of, which is that collaboration, of course, without self-awareness does not work. Trust without self-awareness does not work. And there's this wonderful tool from Joe and Harry, the Johari window, that just reminds us that we want to make the most of this open and free area. We want to make sure that we consciously choose what we tell people about ourselves, because what we tell them makes up the picture of what we see, what they see, and of course informs trust. We want to make sure we are transparent as much as feels comfortable to foster trust, and that we actually ask for feedback. And ask yourself, that feedback that I got, why did I disagree with this? What part of me disagreed with it? You know, where's my red line? What does that say about me and my values? You know, and why do I maybe reveal certain task focus elements of me, but don't really talk very much about the relationship? Be aware of that, because especially in a virtual context, that's super important, okay? Now I've talked enough, and probably more than I should. So let's move on to the very quick toolbox summary before we go to purpose. If you are working in a company where you want to foster trust and collaboration, what is critical is that you invest time in these water cooler conversations, as we call them. That you actively think about telling something about yourself and feedback. What do you want to reveal? That you know who you talk to, and adjust your communication styles. Use games in a sensible way, but games also you feel comfortable with. Use pictures, use questions to engage people. Investigate in visual prompts for feedback as well. And really come maybe to an agreement with your team in the virtual context on how they want to work. So it doesn't have to come all from the leader, but maybe spend some time to agree what the basic rules are of the virtual working of a team, beyond being present, which is, you know, basic meeting hygiene, really. So enough from me. Marie-Louise, the very important point of us talking about purpose.
Absolutely.
Second key driver.
Thank you so much, Britta, and thank you for all your tips and tricks. I've been taking notes. Brilliant. And so I'm delighted to draw the link between purpose and collaboration, because I know that purpose is part of Headspring's leadership framework. So a really kind of important thing that I'd love to mention. And I would like to tell you a story about what people with purpose can achieve when they work together. It's the story of the... So imagine we're back the morning of, and Britta, would you mind muting yourself? I think I can hear my echo.
Of course, I'm so sorry. I will. Hold on.
Right, thank you. So it's the morning of September 11, 2001 in New York City. The towers of the World Trade Center have just been attacked, and millions of people are running for safety. Hundreds of thousands of them are running south to the water's edge. And that is when they realize that Manhattan is indeed an island, and they are trapped. Within minutes of the first tower being hit, Manhattan is being closed off. All the subways are shut, the tunnels are closed, as are the bridges. Everything is locked down, and they are trapped. Next slide, please. Boats, for the first time in over a century, are the only way out of Manhattan. And then the first tower collapses. And everybody is engulfed in a cloud of thick, black smoke. They can't see anything anymore. People are so fear-stricken that they jump into the water. They try to swim away in a desperate fight for their lives. The ferry boats very nearly run them over. And more people come rushing in, come pushing against those that are already trapped until they're standing 10 deep against the seawalls. And everyone is running around in shock. Some are trying to look for family members, for their mothers, for their babies. They're shouting. Next picture, please. So Michael Day makes a call on the radio. All available boats. This is the US Coast Guard. We want you to help with the evacuation of Lower Manhattan. And this simple call galvanizes people and it gives them a purpose. Next slide. Within 20 minutes, hundreds of boats are streaming into the harbors. Ferries, private boats, party boats, fishing boats, tour boats, all appear on the horizon. Remembering this scene later, one captain says that he's worked on the water for 20 years and he's never seen that many boats. If it could float, it was coming to help, he said. Next slide, please. There's chaos, confusion and fear on one side, and it's matched with the human desire to help on the other side. None of the crews knows if they're going to be the next target, if they might inadvertently have let a terrorist on board, and yet they all came to help. Without a plan, without a committee, without previous training or an overarching leadership, this spontaneous boat lift became the largest sea evacuation in history. Next slide. Larger than the evacuation of Dunkirk in World War II, where nearly 340,000 British and French soldiers were rescued in the course of 9 days. On 9/11, nearly 500,000 civilians were rescued from Manhattan Island by boat, and it took less than 9 hours. People involved describe it as the greatest thing they've ever done in their lives, the greatest day that they've ever seen, because they could help others. Next slide, please. So why did this work? I think I'd rather save the time at the moment to give us time for questions at the end. So next slide, please. Let me give you kind of my what I've noticed, what I think sort of stands out for me. And it's the combination of a high degree of purpose and direction for this really spontaneous, unrehearsed, uncoordinated collaboration to work. This clear purpose that aligned to human values, saving lives. This simple call from the US Coast Guards gave everyone a purpose that they could kind of align under. And it was coupled with the high degree of freedom and autonomy. They let the mariners find their own way of how to get there, what choice of vessel were they taking, where were they, thank you for the hearts, it gets me too, thank you, I much appreciate that interaction, thank you. The choice of destination, where were they taking people, was it Hoboken, you know, were they wearing life vests, how they managed to get people on and off. So there's a high degree of freedom and autonomy that lived under this really clear purpose and direction. And because everyone was aligned, they could allow for that freedom and autonomy. And I think that's one of the key and critical aspects for me when it comes to purpose and why it's so important for collaboration is because it gives us that heartfelt kind of drive towards where we're going. And if you're interested in seeing this, there's a great 10-minute video on YouTube. It's called the boat lift video. Google boat lift and 9/11. It has real footage of survivors, and it's been narrated by Tom Hanks, and I highly recommend that you'd see it. I couldn't do it justice, but time permitting, this was the best we could do. And so next slide, please. Well, one back, thank you. We're on, thank you. We're on to my definition of purpose, and it's a quick and kind of dirty one. It's really simple, and for me, it's an individual's, a team's, a department's, or an organization's objective to describe how they're going to contribute to the greater good. And it answers the question, why is my or our work important? And this is the link Britta mentioned between purpose and values. A good purpose is not about the bottom line. It's not about shareholder values, but it will impact both, most likely. But it takes all the stakeholders into account, the employees, the clients, the suppliers, the communities, anybody else who's associated with the company. It even should take the planet and the environment into consideration. And so for me, it's really important that purpose is excavated. It's rooted in the stories of the people and the organization. It's not another kind of slick advertising slogan that you kind of slick over and you come up with in an afternoon with your leadership team. It needs to be dug out by listening to loads of people through different levels in your organization. And talking about levels, there are also different levels of purpose. There's the personal level of me, Mary Louise. What do I stand for? What do I want to be known for? And some people go so far to make a purpose statement. Then there is the role I'm in. For example, I'm a leader. I've got a leadership purpose. If you're in a team, most likely your team has a purpose on what they're delivering and how they are helping others. And there is an organizational purpose. And so something like your leadership purpose has the ability to bridge that quite big gap between what you want to stand for and what your values are and where the organization is. And so in your leadership purpose, you need to find that link. And so let's hear some hard facts about purpose, because as with collaboration, it's not just a nice to have. It's not a feel good kind of little workshop we do on the side. There are tons of studies that have come out in the past 5 years, linking it to improvements in employee engagement, in morale, in performance, profitability, and just about any other business metric there is. So it's a really, really hot topic. And as Britta already mentioned, the Gallup studies, they keep on telling us year on year, only 1/3 of all employees are really engaged. And so, excuse me, we have lots of potential there. And so as my slide says, for the employees, 72% of employees say that they are more likely to stay if they would feel emotionally connected to their company. And this is where working for a higher purpose, for something that is not just the bottom line or the shareholder value, is so critical. It gives me a reason for being, gives me pride. I tell my friends what my company does. And I think one of my favorites is that 9 out of 10 people are willing to earn less in order to do more meaningful work. I mean, just take that in. 9 out of 10 people, 90% of us, are willing to earn less just to do more meaningful work. And a lot of us are doing it through kind of what we do on the side. We work for charities. But if you can give that to your employees internally, I think that's amazing. And sorry to mention, the pharma industry again in AstraZeneca, but I can see, and Britta's seen the same thing, that they're currently working 15 to 18 days because they're the ones who are going to be rolling out the Oxford COVID vaccine if it gets through trials. And while they're absolutely knackered, when they come and call to us, there is a sense of fulfillment. They know why they're doing it and why it's important. And so there's some really interesting research by a Berkeley professor called Morten Hansen, who found that purpose beats passion in terms of performance by a mile. So imagine that, purpose beating passion. The Heath brothers have a reasoning around this, and they think passion is great, but it drives us individually. My passion might not be your passion, whereby purpose unites us. And so there's lots more studies that link purpose to corporate profitability, and especially now that consumers are becoming more and more aware of their spending power and that they can change organizational practices. And as the younger generations grow up and turn into consumers, we expect to see these trends are growing even more. So I'm onto my purpose toolbox now to give you some tips and tricks and tools. If you haven't found your unique life purpose, I wouldn't worry about it too much. I'm a strong believer that our purpose adapts through our lives, and as we try to do different things and take different directions and we grow and learn about ourselves, that personal insight that Britta was talking about, we get a feeling of if we feel on track and if we don't feel on track. And so this is where we can kind of steer and kind of hone it and have a purpose for right now that we kind of keep on honing. But if you're interested in this concept, have a look at the Japanese. It's a massive Venn diagram called Ikigai, and it brings together the what I'm good at, what I love doing, so passion again, what the world needs. And I think that's really important. That's the values piece, the altruistic piece, the beyond myself piece. And what can I get paid for? And so these come up in a Venn diagram, hopefully leading in a sort of very small golden middle. And organizationally, there's been a great idea by Dan Pink in his book Drive around motivation, which I would really recommend. He's got a chapter on purpose, and he would like us to play Whose Purpose Is It Anyway? It comes from the improv show Whose Line Is It Anyway, that you might remember. But the idea is you get your team or your department together and you ask them individually to write down what they think the organization's or the team purpose is. And I think you might be surprised at the variation you find. So it's a great starting point to figure out, are you aligned or might you need some more work? And if you find you might need some more work, again, I would encourage you not to just kind of slick a marketing slogan over it and purpose wash what it is you're doing, but really take the time to listen to the stories and sift through the collective memory of your team or of the organization. And this is kind of where my purpose toolbox ends, and we're now over to kind of a little recap from Britta and then questions from you.
Thank you so much, Marliese. So this is just a little recap of what we have just discussed, our tips and tricks and kind of little elements for your toolbox. But we would like to invite you to ask us any questions you would like to ask us in regards to those topics. And so please, again, write those, I guess, into the question box. Desiree, is that right?
Yes, that is. We do have a few questions that come in. I'm back. First of all, thank you so much for that presentation. That was absolutely amazing. I love the part specifically around purpose and the story around the boat lift. You know, quite emotional, and also it's absolutely amazing to see what people can do when they come together, even though you know it's really stressful and difficult. So thank you so much for that. So we got quite a few questions in. I guess the first one. So you know the whole the whole presentation is really about collaboration.
Mm.
How, because I guess many companies are using quite a few tools when they collaborate. Is there a thing such as collaboration overload? Can it reach a level when it actually is too stressful?
Britta, are you okay for me to take that?
Yes, of course, of course.
Perfect. So yes, so there has been some research from a guy called Adam Grant and his colleagues, and he's looked at kind of collaboration like networks in organizations, and you can map where requests come in and kind of approvals come out, and he finds that there are key roles. For some people, it's roles. So if there are approval cycles that, you know, someone needs to sign off on travel expenditure, something like that, these people have collaboration overload. Not the traditional, I want to work with you, but I need to approve things. So that's one part, is the roles. The second part is just expertise. People have been around the company for a long time. They're known for something. Their expertise might be quite specific, and they're happy to help. And the happy to help end generally sits more with women than it does with men. And there is our natural inclination to help others. And it's quite important to curtail that a bit and have boundaries, because we all need private life and kind of time to rejuvenate to be able to help and not have a burnout because we're so collective. Thank you for the question, whoever asked that. That was great.
No, of course. So would that also have to do with whether the organization is hierarchical? So how would that kind of impact collaboration?
So that's a great question as well. Very strict hierarchies are really can be counterproductive for collaboration, because people don't feel free to trust necessarily, to say their opinion, and to learn also from the different levels and potentially silos that are in those organizations. Which is why I showed you the model, the communication maturity, but also the structural element of it is a really important one. Now, I don't think every organization should be non-hierarchical. You know, if certain cultures, certain origins, certain organizational types, they need certain structures. I think it's more the behavior, the how we deal with those hierarchies that allow for collaboration or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Thank you so much for that answer. So I guess then when you do have when you do want to have collaboration in your company, do you need to have buy-in from management? Like, is it important for management to kind of push it and then it trickles down throughout the organization?
Britta, I think this one's for you. You've so much work. One of those questions I always get is, you know, kind of leaders going, oh, but only if my managers were doing it, you know, so much easier. So what's your answer to that?
It's really important, you know. I mean, you can't implement something that fundamental without management buy-in. And I'm not saying necessarily it has to be everywhere straight away. Of course, if you have germ cells of collaboration and you kind of explode them from within, that's one thing. But really, you need to have a top and the bottom approach in order to make it work, because otherwise the roadblocks will be too big. Totally.
And I would add in a way that if you're looking for a complete culture change, yes, absolutely. But if you think about just collaborating in your team as a leader, you still, you know, it's your team. Set up the practice, like Britta said, be a great role model, be vulnerable, show these things. And especially in these kind of virtual times, spend more time on the relationship and maybe a little bit less time on the task.
All right, that also makes complete sense. Thank you for that. So I guess you touched a bit on building trust virtually, which is, you know, more relevant than ever, especially given so many companies now are, you know, most, I guess, are working from home. Some other are closing their offices. How will the digital world affect collaboration?
If I may just jump in, I think collaboration is more important now than ever before, because everything is much faster now. The digitization has sped up everything, it has compressed time, has brought everything closer to make sure that you collaborate, take the time, make sure that you signpost the different elements of virtual working, make sure you really connect with the people and take the time to talk about things like purpose, as Marliese said, you know, on the different levels is key. I think now that we are where we are, we will not go back. The new normal is about collaboration, is about virtual working, is about trust and purpose. And I think that we will see more of that, because otherwise we can't work together.
And I think I would add one thing, and you've already touched on it, Britta, before, the idea of sort of the virtual tools. You know, is it Slack? Is it Teams? Is it WhatsApp? Is it email? Is it morning stand-ups? It can become a little overwhelming. We're back to the kind of collaboration overwhelm. But if the goal is to work together, then just find a streamlined way that works for maybe 80%. Kind of find the common denominator and then stick to that. Because otherwise people feel like they're missing out on something. You already have that in the face-to-face world, where, you know, if you were co-located with someone and you wandered over to their desk and you got some information, someone else might not know it. But now it's become, because it's been posted somewhere, everyone assumes everyone knows everything. And from my experience, it's not true.
And to build on this, talk about this. I mean, there is nothing keeping you from sitting your team down and go, how are we going to do this? There's, you know, virtual workshops are no lesser so than face-to-face workshops. You need to time them differently. I said this several times, but take the time and understand what's going on and what everyone needs to work at the best virtually.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you. I guess we spoke a bit about how the collaboration overload can happen, but are there any other issues around collaboration that, you know?
Britta, I'm handing this to you. We have about a minute or so to spare.
So very quickly, there are quite a few. One of them is the barriers to, you know, people just not believing in its effect. You know, people needing to see hard cases. You know, the fact that it actually is effective and drives results is one of them. Another one is the underestimation of the investment. I mean, collaboration is hard work. Collaboration costs. You know, starting with resources and lots of other things. So be realistic about what you embark on, and also which roadblocks you have ahead, and think about how you can work around those. So there's quite a few issues alongside overload, but when you really committedly invest in this, it's really worth it.
Okay, well, thank you so much for answering all the questions. I think we're running out of time. We're right on time, actually. A huge thank you, Britta and Marie-Louise, for this presentation and for answering the questions at the end. It was super interesting, and I'm sure I speak for the whole audience when I say this, when I say that there's plenty of things that we can probably learn from and implement ourselves. So thanks again so much. Can we go to the... Yeah, so just quickly, thank you so much to the whole audience. If you have any questions, do get in touch, marketing@headspringexecutive.com. Alternatively, you can go to our contact us page on our website. Also do sign up for our newsletter, because we will send out more information about upcoming webinars that you don't want to miss. Thank you again so much for joining us.
You're so welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Great.
Bye-bye.
Bye.